I'm not trying to, disappoint Lions fans this morning, but let me just go ahead and do that. I'll be enemy number one, to start off your weekend, I guess. But I came across an article. Now, Mike Payton usually does a really good job, and I get it. Like, we're a couple of days away, but this came out on July 16th. And so I read through the article, and I thought to myself, yeah, I just can't agree here. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. So the start of his article is this. He goes on to say, I'm sure the immediate reaction to this idea would be the thought that there's no way Brad Holmes and the Detroit Lions would do that, which is to bring in Brandon Aiyuk. But recent comments from Holmes show that the Lions might not be far off from making moves such as this, and the Lions might be operating off of the same playbook the Rams had with Les Snead. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and think that the Les Snead situation is, they went all in 2021, 2020, when, after the Matt Stafford trade, to really bolster their roster. And they did that so that they could make a Super Bowl run. And they did, and they won. Doesn't work for every team. Doesn't always work like that. I mean, let's just be real here. And I don't think that the Lions are that far off from bringing in some players, of that caliber. I just don't think it's right now, and I definitely don't think it's Brandon Aiyuk, and I'm going to get into the reasons as to why. And then we will go over what Brad Holmes said and why I don't believe it's anywhere close to what Mr. Payton is thinking here. So, as we know, there's been a disgruntled Brandon Aiyuk, and he's wanted to trade. He's requested a trade. I'm on record telling you guys that he holds the majority of the cards here, because if he doesn't want to play, he doesn't have to play. He could sit out and not make $14 million this year. He'll get penalized, a ton of money. But what I heard last night on a podcast is the way that this franchise tag was kind of weaponized. It was never supposed to be weaponized. And they were also talking about Brandon Aiyuk, and if he does sit out, he's going to get fined like $40,000 for every practice he misses. But when you restructure his contract and give him a new contract, what do you think that they do? Well, we just fined you $500,000, and Brandon Aiyuk's going to say, well, I'd like that extra $500,000 back. And they're going to give it to him. So what's the point of penalizing these guys if you're just going to give them the money anyway? Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm saying he really holds all the cards. I mean, you can penalize him all you want. I don't think that's going to deter him from, showing up or not showing up. I don't think it's going to deter him from sitting out or not sitting out. When you look at how much money these guys are making, whether he makes it this year or next year, $40,000 is nothing. Like, that's nothing to these guys. So if your number two has to play in place of your number one, then he's got to be able to produce like a number one, in my opinion. Like, your one and two should be synonymous. Like, they should be darn near equal in inability. Now, that it's very few and far between that you can have that opportunity in the NFL, but you have plenty of teams that do. I think that's where the Lions are trying to get. That's what they were expecting from Jameson, is getting, a player that can play next to him, with him, and for him when needed. I would say that not many Lions fans wouldn't want to have Aiyuk. I mean, who wouldn't want to have another badass wide receiver on your team next to Amon-Ra St. Brown, especially if Amon-Ra St. Brown were to have some sort of an injury that would keep him out this season for any length of time? You would have another guy that can go out and produce the type of yardage that he does. We haven't seen enough from Jameson Williams to, in my opinion, again, to really rest your hat on, is he going to be able to do it? Is he going to be able to take over as the number one if Amon-Ra St. Brown goes down? So Brandon Aiyuk, to analyze just how big of a mistake, in my opinion, this would be, I think that we have to, include what the cost would be to get Brandon Aiyuk. Now, it's been floated that the Devontae Adams deal is the deal. Like, that's the one you look at. So if you're going to be giving up a first and a second round pick in 2025, let's just say the Lions get lucky and they give up a first next year and a second the year after that, or vice versa. Any combination of a first and a second round pick. You also have to realize that Aiyuk expects a brand new contract, and that's why the next topic, dysfunctional teams do dysfunctional things, also is in line with this Brandon Aiyuk deal. So I feel like there is no better analytical tool than to look at this season's rookie deals. Marvin Harrison Jr. Let's take a look at his contract. We'll compare it for the first round pick of Aiyuk talent potential, someone that could, potentially be as good as Aiyuk. And then, of course, Ennis Rakestraw, our own second round pick. We'll look at his contract numbers to kind of give us a fair idea of what the Lions would be losing if they were to do something like this. So I'm going to start off with Harrison. He signed a fully guaranteed deal worth $35.374 million. That includes a $22.547 million signing bonus. Now, the base salaries are the league minimum throughout, all first 4 seasons of his career. where he makes 795, 960, 1.7 million or 1.19 million. So not much money base-wise, but that's not the number we look at. We look at what he's going to get paid overall. It's like I said, it's not the only compensation that he'll be receiving. So he'll also be getting paid a signing bonus and then guaranteed money that also includes training camp roster bonuses that are worth $8.8 million, which would be 1.4 in 2025, 2.9 in 2026, 4.4 in 2027. For salary cap purposes, though, the signing bonus is obviously prorated over the first 4 seasons. When you break it all down, okay, and we're just going to use some average numbers this morning, it's $9 million per season. That's what Marvin Harrison Jr., an amazing talent, is getting paid as a first-round pick. Rakestraw, 61st pick. So I went early first-round pick, late second-round pick to kind of give us a good average here. The 61st overall pick signed a 4-year contract that is slotted in value of $6.485 million. The deal includes $1.5 million signing bonus. His average deal, again, all in, his is a little bit less exciting. His average deal all in is $1.6 million per season. In total, a first round and a second round pick. If the Lions were to trade that away to bring in Brandon Aiyuk, they would be giving up, which would equate to roughly $42.4 million for 2 players for 4 seasons, and a 5th-year option on your first rounder, which is roughly $10.6 million in total cap hits every year on average. Now, it's not how the contracts are slated, but we're going to do average round numbers, okay? Brandon Aiyuk wants to make $30 million base, as he feels he is worth more than Amon-Ra St. Brown. He wants to be closer to Justin Jefferson money. And in 2026, Justin Jefferson will earn $38 million. Amon-Ra will earn $33 million. So if you were to combine those two, again, I doubt the contracts would line up this way, but it would be pretty darn close. You're talking $71 million for 2 wide receivers, more than your quarterback. $71 million. Now, you tell me on what green earth any team is going to want to afford that, can afford that, should afford that. That's nuts. The Lions would give up, only having to spend $10.6 million on their first and second round picks that they could keep. And I don't know about you, but I trust Brad Holmes a whole heck of a lot in the draft. So we would be giving up 2 picks that cost us $10.6 million per year in place of bringing in 1 player that would cost us on average $30+ million a year. Potential that those first picks that we're giving up, the first and the second round pick, could end up being the next Brandon Aiyuk. Let's say you grab 2 wide receivers. One of them could end up being the next Amon-Ra St. Brown. You just don't know. Brandon Aiyuk could end up ripping an ACL this year. You just don't know. Anything could happen, right? So why would you put yourself in that kind of position? I just don't think it makes a whole lot of sense. I don't see Brad Holmes doing something like this. And I definitely don't see him giving up our future for a player that, in my opinion, doesn't really fit our team. Like Eric was saying earlier, doesn't fit the grit culture. I think he's a hard worker. Obviously, I don't know everything about Brandon Aiyuk because I don't study him like I do the Lions players. But let's just say he is a perfect fit. Let's just say he hits all, the bells and whistles. He's everything that you want. From a culture identity, from a personality identity, everything. Then does it still make sense? I don't think so. You're going to end up spending $20 million more per season for 1 player than to have 2 players that you can develop and keep around for the next 8 years and still wouldn't cost you that kind of money. So this is why, I really get off into the stats in the numbers and the analytics and all that, and why Lions fans, in my opinion, kind of need to look at things a little bit deeper. We kind of get ingrained to look at the surface and just kind of what's hovering, on top of the pond water, if you will. But underneath the pond, man, it's pretty mucky. And that's where you guys need to look, in my opinion. Again, get into the muck and really look at what can happen to your team, because this would not bode well over the next few seasons as far as financial stability for the Lions. And if you want to be a 1-year wonder, then bring in Brandon Aiyuk. Be a 1-year wonder. Then the next season, you're probably going to break it all up anyway because you can't afford it. And I'm sure Brad Holmes could arrange that. He absolutely could. We have the money to do it right now. But if you want, to win it all and then continue to win and not go back to the losing ways, then I would urge you to kind of look at these things a little bit more granular than just the face value. It takes a lot of research sometimes and a global understanding of how NFL franchises operate and how they work, sustain success, which teams have it, which teams don't. I'll tell you right now, look at the Kansas City Chiefs. How many seasons have they brought in these high-priced free agents, big-name stars for big money? They haven't done it a whole lot. A few players here or there. They just shed, L'Jarius Sneed. They got rid of a high-priced guy. The teams that do it well, the franchises that operate at a high level, the great ones, they just don't make these mistakes. It would be great to have Brandon Aiyuk, but here's a quote from Brad Holmes, which recently, recently he was quoted anyway, and it may explain what Mike Payton was thinking when he wrote this piece, but it also might explain a little bit more of what Brad Holmes is thinking. And I think that this could maybe go both ways. You might think that Brad is on the brink of buying versus building because of how this roster is starting to fill out. So here's the quote. As me and our assistant general manager, Ray Agnew, we were both with Les, that's Les Snead, and he was actually a more integral point person in the free agent process because of his role as a director of pro scouting at the time. But we talked about how when Les first got there in 2012, obviously he drafted for a lot of years. And you're attacking every single position in free agency. You're trying to build the roster. When Ray and I got here in 2021, we had to take the same approach. But as you kind of build the roster and get more strong in certain areas, your process alters a little bit because you can be a little bit more, well, we've always been strategic and selective, but you can be more selective than you have in the past. So we're not quite there yet where Les and the Rams are, but where he really started to be very, very, very selective there. But me and Ray were just talking about that, and we were getting there. We are getting closer. So when I look at Brad Holmes and what we've done, we filled our holes in free agency. We selected the players that we wanted to cultivate in the draft. We didn't go out and buy big-name free agents to plug holes. We brought in good deals, commensurate players, commensurate to their salary anyway. Players that we thought they could be really good backups, but maybe have a possibility to start if we needed him to. That's where I see Brad plugging holes as free agency. And he does a great job at doing that. Now, he's done more in free agency the last 2 seasons than he did the first, 2 seasons. So then he goes on to say that, as you kind of build your roster out and you're getting stronger in certain areas, so our defensive line got a lot deeper, our cornerback room got really deep this year, and maybe our wide receiver room isn't as deep, but then you look at the offensive line. Is it deep? Maybe not, but it's on the front side of the offensive line. I mean, it's the best offensive line in the league. Behind it, we've got some young players that we're cultivating. Giovanni Manu, Christian Mahogany. We still have Coyote Osika still there. I'm not sure he's going to make the roster. Colby Sorsdahl, again, a draft pick that they're cultivating. So we got 3 guys that we're cultivating. We're watering these seeds every day, right? We're giving them some sunlight every day. We're hoping that they're going to blossom into a really great backup because we want to make sure that Penei Sewell can remain in the game for a while. Obviously, he's signed long-term. You bring in a guy like Kevin Zeitler to fill a hole this year, who is a top athlete, top player at the guard position. That was a big fill for Brad Holmes. That was a perfect alignment for this team. So when I see what Brad Holmes is doing, he is plugging holes with high-caliber players. Carlton Davis, starter for Tampa Bay. Maybe he won't be a starter for the Lions at some point, but right now he's a starter. Amik Robertson, starter for the Raiders. Lions went out and banged it away in the draft. He may not be a starter in 2024 for the Lions, but he's going to be an extremely good backup. Emmanuel Mosley, starter for the 49ers. Injury issues, may not be a starter because he's fallen down the depth chart. So we've cultivated and we've also plugged holes the right way through free agency. We haven't gone out and spent big money on guys like a Brandon Aiyuk, a Danielle Hunter, or anybody else, a Chase Young, Montez Sweat, anybody you could think of that might have been available, trade deadline or free agency that, we wanted. I wanted a Matabuiki or a Christian Wilkins. They ended up getting way too much money. I wanted a Robert Hunt, to join this offensive line. He got way too much money. So Brad's doing it the right way, in my opinion. And I think, the proof is what happened this last season. So it's simple, I think, that the great ones draft well, right? You live inside the draft to find your future. And then you sign your own players that they have spent all of these years cultivating and developing. And then at some point, and this is kind of where I'm taking his quote here, that, they're getting close because, their roster has filled out to a point of where now they can be very, very, very selective. His quote, very, very, very selective. So when you get to a point, where you can start to add key figures to the team to make a push, there's 2 ways that can happen. It's either in free agency or trade deadline. Now, I don't think that you want to overspend, or overshoot the moon and break in the bank for a decade here. I don't think that's the right approach. And that can happen if you bring in guys like Danielle Hunter that make a boatload of money, Brandon Aiyuk that makes a boatload of money. You bring in a high-price free agent like that wants a max deal, that doesn't have a max deal right now, and you're going to break your bank. So I'm not saying that Aiyuk wouldn't wouldn't be a great opportunity for the Lions. I think he's going to be a great opportunity for any team that he either ends up with or, sticks with the 49ers. But what I'm also saying is this. I'm not saying that Aiyuk also wouldn't be so pissed off at the 49ers that he wouldn't just play one season, maybe at a better contract than what he's getting now and maybe not a full 4-year max deal and forego signing this 4-year mega deal in hopes of adding a ring to his resume. He could do that. He absolutely could. He could be so ticked off at what they've done that he could say, you know what, I will go to the Lions. And you know what, I will take $20 million this year. It's more than I was going to make. And then next year, I'll be a free agent to go sign wherever I want. He could do that. And that would certainly cement his opportunity to get a max deal or even more money if he stays healthy through this season. If the Lions go deep in the playoffs or win a Super Bowl, man, his money would just pile up. He would be betting on himself. So I just don't see the 49ers getting rid of him. At the end of the day, here's where I'm at. The Lions didn't bring in any high-priced free agents in the spring, and the Lions already have a top 5 offense. I feel if they were going to make any moves between now and week 1, it would be on the defensive side of the ball. As we just don't know what we have yet with DJ Reader's timetable to come back and when he's supposed to play. What is that going to look like with him, out of the defense? Because we still have questions to get answered with Josh Pascal, Levi Onwuzurike, Mathieu Betts, Marcus Davenport. There's some questions, right? And those questions are probably going to be answered in training camp. So until we see what happens in training camp and potentially the first few weeks of the season, then I think that Brad Holmes could potentially make a run for somebody. And let's be honest here. That's the right approach. See what you have. The first few weeks of the season are not going to kill you. It's not going to put this team, behind in any way, shape, or form to not still make a run, at the division. We have the money to do it. Brad Holmes is saving all of his pennies up right now to make sure that he has room to make a deal. But it's not a Brandon Aiyuk deal, in my opinion. It's not another offensive high-priced player when we already have an amazing cast of characters. There's only so many places that the ball can go. Between Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs and the emergence of Jameson Williams and David Montgomery and Amon-Ra St. Brown, how many more players can you fit on the offensive side of the ball that are going to get the ball? Get 60 snaps probably in a game, 60. How many times is Aiyuk going to touch the ball, when your running backs are getting fed 45% of the time? So I think that's where you've got to justify the money to the player, to the snap count, to how many times is he going to get the ball. I mean, it would be a war between Aiyuk, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Laporta to be able to get the ball. I mean, that'd be like the only 3 guys that you'd be throwing the ball to anyway at that point. So what do you want to say on Brandon Aiyuk? I just put him to bed. Look, it just does not make sense by any sense of the word. You're going to give up 2 future prospects that are going to cost you 25% of what Brandon Aiyuk's deal would cost. You're losing a player, and you're losing, $20 million a year. It's crazy.